You know, I think somebody said in the comments section of one of the WWE highlights from Raw on YouTube that Dixie Carter has to be grinding her teeth right now in TNA. The reason being is because it seems that it wasn't even that long ago she had Bully Ray back on the roster as the general manager. But then all of a sudden, a little after he's on the roster, he ends up getting taken out, and that's the last we see of him. And then all of a sudden, last night on Raw, he shows back up with Devon, and the Dudley Boys are back full-time, from what I understand, in the WWE. So, I guess the question is, what does TNA do about the inevitable? That's right, what does TNA do about the inevitable? The inevitable being that whether or not Bound for Glory is the last pay-per-view ever, or for the time, what do they do about all their superstars and knockouts? Because apparently the superstars are going on a majority of them seem to be going on a pay-per-appearance, assumingly. Which means, even if they're champions, they can show up and defend the titles anywhere. And if they're not champions, it also means they're freed up to show up anywhere they want. I'll give you an example. One of TNA's recent and newest acquisitions that was representing GFW, if you will, in storyline for the invasion was former ROH star Tommaso Ciampa. And it's not even a month or so when he made his appearance in a six-sided ring on a match for Explosion. It's not even a month since he made his Impact debut. Sorry about that. My dog thought she heard my mom home. My dog basically thought she heard my mom had come home. But anyway, what was I? Oh yeah. Not only was Tommaso Ciampa making his Impact debut in a six-sided ring a few weeks or a week or two, a couple weeks after making his Explosion debut for TNA in the six-sided ring, he makes his debut on Impact inside of a six-sided ring. Now all of a sudden, a few weeks later, and you'll see this on September 2nd, he makes his NXT debut for the WWE. That's right, he makes his NXT debut for the WWE in this Dusty Rhodes Classic Tag Team Tournament, which is an initiative to bring in new, fresh talent from all over, whether they work for a promotion or they don't. And again, what does TNA do to avoid the inevitable? You know, a lot of people are pointing out that this is just the beginning for them. I mean, the first real major blow for them wasn't Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan going back to WWE, and somewhat it was. And it wasn't Mick Foley going back to WWE. You know, it wasn't any of that, although part of it was. What it was, in a sense, is you have someone that became sort of like the franchise player in Sting Sting basically looked at TNA as another WCW and wanted to help them out, doing something that nobody thought would happen, and that's jump ship to WWE, which he has. You have the one person you thought WWE would never get, one of the top indie darlings, TNA franchises, originals if you will, in Samoa Joe, jumping over, as well as you've had a few others before that. And now you have someone like Tommaso Ciampa, who's been leapfrogging from Ring of Honor, GFW, TNA, and now WWE. And TNA, you think this would be a great acquisition for them because here's a guy that was a major force in a sense for Ring of Honor, working for them, and now all of a sudden he's showing up in WWE. It's like, what is going on here? Right? And to me, this again is just asking that question of what does TNA do? And obviously, to me, TNA's got to do whatever they can to avoid losing any more. Because, like I said, it didn't just start with Hogan, Flair, Foley, and then Sting, and then Samoa Joe and all that, jumping ship over to WWE. It didn't just start with them. You know, and it's not going to end with them. But now you also have the Dudley boys showing back up. And like I said, this is basically all within less than a month or 2 month span of this whole, Bully Ray becoming the GM of the authority, the GM, the law, if you will, of Impact, and all of a sudden, less than a month or two later, he's back on WWE television with Devon full time as the Dudley Boys. It's like, what does TNA do? Because now you got people coming out and saying, well, predicting that the next person on the list is going to be Kurt Angle. Which could be. Kurt Angle's contract comes up at the beginning of the year. He could be next. They're looking, and some people are even saying things like the Hardys could be going next too, even though some people question if WWE wants to deal with Jeff again. Look, if Jeff is popular in the WWE's eyes, and he hasn't had that much of a drug problem, basically it's like this. If Jeff is sober enough to prove that he can be clean while with that company, well, with the WWE, and let's not kid ourselves, WWE does a far better job, supposedly, at trying to keep their superstars and divas clean, and out of that drug problem and all that, supposedly. But some are predicting them coming back. Some are saying Kurt's next, and then as far as TNA originals, you got people saying Rude could be next. Young could be Eric Young, who's with GFW now, could be next. Bobby Roode could be next. A whole list of people. Magnus is with GFW. He could be heading down that way, or heading to WWE. You got people talking about, maybe Lashley making a comeback. Things like that, and even Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway, and even EC3. These are all names people are throwing out there as being the next stars of TNA to jump ship to WWE, perhaps before the year is out, and perhaps after Bound for Glory, because they don't know the certainty of the future of TNA. They don't. So that could all happen. That could all occur. Whether it does or not, it's totally up to them, and it's totally up to TNA. But again, the question's asked, how does TNA avoid this? Well, it's real simple. TNA's got to pick up their slack. They got to get their heads out of their butts, realize the mistakes they're making, fix those mistakes as best they can, go out and do whatever you have to get another television deal, or heck, whether it's through another cable network, or heck, even through a streaming service like Hulu or Netflix, or even Ruka, who knows, get something going, maybe even YouTube, get something going, so that you're not out in the cold. So your inevitable fate of being buried 6 feet under doesn't become a reality. So if I'm TNA, that's what I do. But right now, it doesn't look like they're doing it. True, ratings are up and everything because yes, the invasion has, between them and GFW, has garnered some interest, but it hasn't garnered that much interest as they would like. The only reason they're tuning into it is because people like invasion angles. End of story. But I think Damian Nelson and David Hero said it best on PWR this past Saturday. You know, how are you going to convince them to shuck down $39, $49, $59 for a Bound for Glory main event that we've seen before on Impact between Drew Galloway, Drew McIntyre, and EC3, Ethan Carter III, aka formerly WWE's Derek Bateman? How are you going to convince them to do that? How are you going to market people to do that? How are you going to market people to want to see Bobby Roode and Lashley for the King of the Mountain title? I mean, if you want to really get people to tune in, here's the honest truth. Here's the honest truth. The world title match should be Lashley Roode. The King of the Mountain match should be EC3 Galloway. That's the honest truth, folks. That is. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from these athletes, from these superstars, but I think persona-wise, Lashley and Roode is the more attractive main event. Is the one people would shuck down money for. So, again, to me, they did have a point. It's like, how are you going to convince us to get invested in an EC3 McIntyre-Galloway match for the world title? You're not. You're not going to do it. You can't. And this is one of those mistakes TNA has to fix. Because if they don't, and Bound for Glory 2015's it, then they're done. They're it. They're gone. It doesn't matter if you have live events here and there. It doesn't matter if you have a UK tour or anything planned. If you don't get some, right off the bat, if you don't try to pick yourselves back up, despite your ratings going up just a little bit because people love invasion angles, you're going to go straight down into the ground. You're going to get flushed down the toilet. TNA needs to get their act together to avoid the inevitable. That's what I feel they need to do. Because if not, every single name that I've mentioned and that other people have mentioned is going to do exactly what Sting, Joe, the Dudleys, and even before them, Hogan, Flair, and Foley, maybe not as much as these other names, as the others I just mentioned, are going to do exactly what they did, and that's jump over to WWE. Even if they have to compete in NXT, they will do it. TNA could try their best to try to get AJ back, AJ Styles. Tell you honestly, after AJ's contract is up with New Japan, he'll either opt to stay with New Japan, either sign with Ring of Honor, or more than likely sign with NXT. And if he was to choose between TNA and NXT, AJ Styles would be like, I'd rather choose NXT. And that's the flat out truth. So again, the question is, what does TNA do? Well, I gave my answer. What is yours?